Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. My name's Nehemiah, and today we're looking at this piece of metal, the We Knives Deacon. This is a very new knife, and it caught my eye as soon as we started to trickle out some pictures on Instagram, and I was immediately smitten. Very, very interested in this knife, and I pretty much bought it on set as soon as it got on Blade HQ. So, a little bit of a bias here because it definitely looked like my kind of knife. I'll try to be as non-biased as I can and still go over all the points of the knife, but just know that going into this, I was pretty excited for it. First thing we should do is our size comparison. Now, this is a small knife. It is not a large knife. 3.25 inch blade, which I've gone on record saying it's one of my favorite blade sizes. 3.33 or 3.25, pretty similar, but those are my favorite ranges for everyday carry knife. I have other knives, I have big knives, I have smaller knives, but that's my favorite and something that I again am kind of biased towards. But as you can see, the blade cutting edge wise is still much better than our Para 3. A little bit shorter than our PM2, so right in my wheelhouse. Something of a little medium size knife. Most people complain that this blade shape is a little kind of in no man's land, where you could go up to 3.5 inch for a lot of laws. Other laws are at the 3 inch range, so this is kind of splitting the difference, which to my knowledge there isn't too many laws that has anything about a 3.25 inch blade. But if you ignore laws and you're just designing a knife for the hand and for everyday carry, I think 3.25 inch is the most practical in actual practical use. And so this is your size comparison. Maybe just a couple other knives for size. This is something gigantic. Here's something that is smaller. I've got the Kaiser Feist, which is a very small knife. It actually makes the Deacon look a lot bigger than it is. But that's kind of your range. And with that, we will get into our dent. The decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. First off, in the decent is this blade. I am a sucker for a classic, just kind of drop point blade. I know this is kind of boring, but it's really freaking practical. It's very similar to the Keen, which I like. A lot of famous knives, like you have the Shirogorov line, all pretty much share the shape. You have the Holt Spectres, just a classic shape, and one that has proven time and time again to be super duper practical. Now, like those, a lot of those blades, I like how clean this blade is. You know, I'm a stickler for a bunch of garbage printed on this, and I think we, of all the companies, has picked up on this trend and is just giving us pretty much a bare blade. This is very, very similar to the Kaiser, not Kaiser, but the We Knives Pleroma that I reviewed. I very much like that blade too, and similarly, they've managed to hide the steel type, very small, little tiny, subtle M390. It looks like M300, but it's a 9, I assure you. And that's the way I want it done. I think that's perfect. I don't want to be guessing what steel this is. In the sands of time, coming across this knife, it's not a total mystery as to what steel this is, but you're not being advertised to like you're looking at the side of a bus. That's the perfect sweet spot, I think. More knives should be picking up on this trend and following suit. Or go all in and just have total sellout of Blade HQ all over it. Do one or the other, but I don't like the in between. Next thing I want to talk about is the ergonomics. Now, for me personally, this would be in the excellent because it does fit really, really well for me. But because it's a subjective thing, unless it's ergonomics that's universal to most hand sizes, I want to keep it out of the excellent. This is barely perfect for me. I mean, as you can see over here, it's hanging onto my pinky so it doesn't feel like it's falling off. But if I had a bigger hand, this would not be comfortable, I surmise. So keep that with a grain of salt. The other thing I'd like to point out is just the weight of the knife. Now, obviously we have a lot of carbon fiber on here, so it is going to be pretty lightweight. About 2.71 ounces. That's definitely under an ounce an inch by a good margin. It's not as light as the Hadian Light was, but I think it's still something that is worth pointing out. In carrying the knife, it was extremely lightweight, Really didn't even feel like I had anything in my pocket. I think this is a champ for weight. It really is like gold star, A plus. Any lighter than this, it just doesn't really matter. So they hit the nail on the head there. I really like the crowned spine of the blade. It's very well done. It's very subtle. It gives the knife a clean look. It's soft. You're not gonna, damage yourself on that at all. The jimping is subtle, but it's in the right spot. It does just enough without digesting your finger. It also transitions well to this like 3-line motif that they have. The W, the E, the 3 lines here, 3 lines here, the 3 lines on the clip. I kind of like that subtle little design kind of flair that kind of ties the whole design together. It's something that isn't screaming at you, but it's also something I notice and appreciate. The stone kind of rub satin on this, stone wash rub satin. It's not a stone wash. It's some kind of subtle kind of finish on there. It's very attractive. I like this a lot. You'll notice that I put a garbage edge on this and scratch my blade up a little bit. You gotta eventually try it on the nice knife, guys. I'm a sharpener noob, but I'm trying. You gotta practice. The blade looks great. The scrapes are there, but it hides it pretty well with that finish. I think any other finish and it'd be a lot worse, more reflective on those scrapes. So I appreciate that, and I think it looks great. Now we get into the fun parts. The flipper tab is actually really, really nice. It's pretty small, so it's not taking up too much space. Again, this is a small knife, but there's jimping, and the jimping goes all the way around the edge. It's kind of a thin profile, but it just grabs in right there. It's not easy to fall off the flipper tab. It's not awkward at all to grab that. Fires every time. Works really well. I like the straight line right here that they kind of draw on that flipper tab. Flipper tabs are usually a little bit more of an eyedrop shape, but this is nice. It kind of blends in with the blade a little bit and still manages to be quite practical on this end of it. And it works really well, and I don't think I would change the flipper tab in any way. They really knocked it out of the park on that one. This bolster type thing going on is nice. I think it gives it a little bit of a visual flair, adds a little bit of class to the design. It does come in 4 different colors. You have normal like gray titanium, you have a champagne type color, this purple, and then just blue. The same exact blue that's on the screws. All 4 of them have the blue screws, to my knowledge, maybe not the gray one. I skip over the gray. That's like the most boring thing, so I don't even look at it. But the other 3 for sure have the blue accent. So if you're kind of thrown off by like purple and blue, or champagne and blue, just go for the blue and blue. That's more matchy. I think both the purple and the blue and the champagne and blue kind of has a cool like royal feel to it. That's pretty douchebaggy of me to say, but it's true. And I like my knives not to all look the exact same. So some people don't like the pops of color. Well, some people don't like to live in a monochrome life and want choices. And so I think WE does the right thing. If you want the boring gray one, go for it, Eeyore. Otherwise, you've got some fun colors to pick from. And I appreciate that WE is giving us the choice. I really think the carbon fiber on this is done pretty well. It's very comfortable. It's machined very well. The seams are extremely tight. WE's fit and finish is just really impressing me. This is 2 knives in a row where I really am quite impressed. There's not uneven, distance between the backspacer and the carbon fiber. And it feels good, looks good, does the job. And so I really appreciate, this premium parts. You got M390 and you have carbon fiber, and both were done really well. The clip is something that I'm not necessarily in love with, but I also don't have a particular issue with. It has enough spring to it. It gets in fine. It doesn't offer a hot spot. It's not super high or low. It's kind of in the medium range. There is the lanyard hole here, which we'll talk about, but it's such a narrow, small knife that, just having that little bit poking out of your pocket isn't too bad. You got the blue, the purple, and the carbon fiber, so it'll be like, what is that? It's not too bad. It's definitely better than like, a pair of 3, which is like a whole mess, if you don't have one of these clips on. So I think this is okay. It's passable. Give it like a B, maybe on a clip. But yeah, it's fine. And again, I like the little 3-line kind of motif that they've got going on, which is classy. Another thing I like to mention is just how easy it was to take this apart. You can just unscrew the clip if you want to get on this side, unscrew the scale, the carbon fiber comes right off. There's 2 additional screws under this. When I first got the knife, it had great action. I was like, I don't really need to get inside, but I decided to just for science, and so I got into the knife, and it was very easy, very straightforward. You have your bearing system, all makes sense. Very, very typical Wii kind of action. And the disassembly was maybe not as interesting as the Pleroma, which I did eventually take apart before I traded the knife off. I think I'm going to get the Pleroma again, just so you're not shocked. I like that knife. I'll probably wait for the champagne one. Don't like the gray, boring Eeyore knives. But that was more innovative and interesting to take apart. It wasn't necessarily difficult, just difficult enough to where after I cut myself, I kind of gave up on the first one. But ended up being actually pretty interesting once I got into it. This is a lot less exciting, much more boring, but still easy to get into. So for somebody that takes apart your knives, this is a plus for that. Now it's time to get into the excellent. And on the first excellent, I've got my 3 pillars of good fidget factor action. I've got the open, and I've talked about the flipper tag, but I didn't really talk about the actual action itself. It fires out really nice. This is very, very good action. The detent is precisely medium. It's not really strong. It's not really weak. It's something that, even if I push button it, I can get it to open, which is usually a sign of a good detent that's been like dialed in. If it's a little bit weaker, sometimes you can't get the push button to work and you have to do the light switch with a little bit of speed and power behind it. But this is good enough to where if you prefer a push button or the normal light switch, you'll be able to get the job done. And it does have a good acoustic sound. It sounds pretty good. I always bring it up when the sound is good. It's not a necessity, but it's just that, art of the knife and the fidget factor of it is if it sounds weird or doesn't sound like anything at all, it maybe isn't as satisfying to fidget with the knife. So when it's there, I appreciate it. The close is very good. So if I've got the detent ball on the tang of the blade, it's just a simple jostle and the knife pretty much closes. It doesn't have to be like, even the Pleroma was a little bit more finicky than this, where I maybe had to go jostle, where this is one jostle. And this is, after cleaning both out, it wasn't just the initial action on the Pleroma. I think this is a little bit better on the close. I think they're equal on the open. The Pleroma is really snappy on the open, whether you do spider flick or the thumb studs. But this is really, really good. Now, the third pillar is disengaging the lock bar, or the liner lock in this case. If this is a pain in the neck, I don't care how good the open is. I know I'm going to have to close it eventually. And when I do, if I have to pry my finger in there and it hurts, the whole thing stops. As a fidget knife, the brakes are put on and you just can't do anymore. I just reviewed this guy, and that's basically, the open is awesome, the close is cool, but the disengaging is garbo on this knife. And so that makes a world of difference as to whether or not I'm actually going to want to carry the knife, use the knife, or fidget with the knife. And I'm happy to report that they did a really good job on the disengaging of the liner lock. This is even better than the Pleroma. The Pleroma has a little bit of jimping in there, but for whatever reason, the lock bar was a little bit stiffer, and there wasn't as much of a raise right here on the liner lock. This one, I get to do it horizontally without having to pinch or kind of mush my finger in there. And so it's very easy to get that lock bar off the tang of the blade. It's very smooth, natural. I can do it hundreds of times and it wouldn't matter at all. I can do the full run, open, disengage, close, and it's a pleasure to do. This is a really good fidget knife, guys. It doesn't have multiple ways to open, like the Pleroma. I could flick it or I could do the thumb stud. So it's not like the best fidget knife ever, but as far as the actual action, that 3-prong trifecta, very, very good. It's in my excellent, and it's part of the reason why I want to keep this knife. Second excellent thing is just the overall size and kind of package that this knife is offering you. This is something that is incredibly classy. Maybe you don't like the purple, but keep in mind there's other colors. It's something that you're not going to be afraid to take out in the lunchroom. It's something that is extremely practical. If you need to cut up open an apple, it slices well enough, it gets the job done. It's M390, so you're not having to worry about like wiping it off like crazy if you just cut into some acidic fruit. It's that perfect like cross section of like an EDC, just a knife you can always have and don't really have to worry about it, a gentleman's folder, and then a fidget knife all in one. And so the whole time I've been using this knife, one knife keeps jumping up in my mind, and that's the Shirogorov Hodion Light that I reviewed. I really like that knife. I ended up having to trade it because at the time I could only pick between it and the Hodi R. And this is the exact same blade length, very similar blade shape, has very similar action. Actually, I think I prefer the flipper tab and the actual open on this knife than on the Hodion Light. I think the disengaging is the same. The Hodion Light maybe dropped a little bit freer to where like it would already be moving right here. With this one, I have to do that initial jostle. But really, parts, carbon fiber, M390, in that case, it was Van X37. I think they're on par, even though they're not exactly the same. This costs like a quarter of the cost. It's $250 for this knife right now instead of, $700, $750. So a third of the cost, I guess, to be precise. This is comparing very favorably in that like perfect size, perfect blade shape, EDC, kind of gentleman's fidget factor knife, the kind of knife that I'm really interested in. And if somebody offered me this or the Shiro, I would only take the Hodion simply because it costs more. If they both cost the same, I would have a hard time picking between the knives, to be honest. So that's kind of the second excellent part, is just the entire package, the role that this knife is filling and how well it's filling that role. Last thing, and it kind of bleeds into this, is just the value of. Some people look at a knife and they think $250, no way. Maybe you're not that deep into the hobby yet and hedonic adaptation has only started to work on you. Maybe your budget and your lifestyle is just, this will never be a reality for you. But if you're watching this video right now and you've gotten this deep into it, I think you need to acknowledge this is a good value. This is something that, makes custom knife makers scared. They're using the same parts and they're charging 3-4 times as much for something that performs action wise very similarly. This is a pinnacle of just ultimate value without having to make some major concession of the backlash from Civivi, which is made by We, is awesome, but it's got crappy steel. We're factoring in the cost to what it is, but it's still, I don't want to use that knife as my only knife. I could, but I don't want to. This is the one I want to use. This is something I could use for the rest of my life and be happy as a lark. So, value, the size, and the action. Those are my three excellent things. Let's move into the nitpicks. Nitpick number one, this is right hand, tip up only. There's no option, as far as I'm aware, to switch it over. I don't have any word on if they're going to come out with a lefty model. It's kind of sad because I like this knife so much that only right-handers can really comfortably use this knife. If you're lefty and you like this, keep your ear to the ground and hopefully they'll come out with one. Buy the knife, show or tell your friends that are right-handed to buy the knife so it does well, and maybe they'll be encouraged to do a left-hand version. Next thing, it's a small nitpick, but something I do want to point out. There was some backlash, a tiny bit of backlash on Instagram about the thickness of the blade. So it basically starts at 4 centimeters right here, where a lot of weed knives start at 3. If it's in the smaller size category that this knife is in. And so I think it cuts pretty well, but you'll notice how quickly the stock of the knife thins out. It's something that I think thins out even faster than, like the Para 3 starts pretty thick, even thicker. But it's a gradual churn to get to the tip. This one, I think it's a little overblown. Cutting with this knife is pretty good. And, sharpening it and stuff, I can tell you, the plunge grind, this is mostly me just screwing up, but I shouldn't have sharpened back so far. But you could tell, the thickness of this blade is making the angle not going to be completely the same. That's on a lot of knives. It's not a huge deal, but, for such a small knife, something you're probably not going to use as a pry bar or, any crazy hard use, which you shouldn't do with a knife anyway. Maybe it could have been a little bit thinner, but I think given the rest of the blade shape, how high the grind is, it cuts really well. I didn't have any problems with it. I think it's a little exaggerated, but I think it's worth noting that they do have knives with a little bit thinner stock, and maybe they could have done like a 3.5 would have been good, maybe instead of 4. I'll keep mentioning this, but I really don't like this lanyard hole. I think the lanyard hole, I just don't want it on the knives anymore, guys. Like, I don't know where you're supposed to put it. I mean, like normal knives, if you want to put it somewhere, put it right here. The blade won't be in the way most of the time. You could put the clip way higher. I don't know if they had enough room for that. They've got a lot of screws in the backspacer that we can't see, but they are there. I'm sure you could rearrange those and still keep the integrity of the knife all right. It's just annoying that you have what could be completely invisible in your pocket with only the pocket clip sticking out. Instead, you've got this little thing. It looks interesting enough, and it's not that bad, but still, like, I'm never going to put a lanyard hole on this, or a lanyard on this hole, whatever. I'm over it. Give people a version to buy one with lanyard holes all over the place if they want one. There's nothing for the terrible on this one. I like the knife a lot, and the nitpicks are pretty few and far between, and I don't think they're a big deal. I think overall, nothing really justifies the terrible, unless you're left-handed. That would be terrible. That'd be kind of sad. So outside of that, I don't really have anything real in the terrible section. So with that, let's get into the conclusion. Well, how do we wrap this up? Obviously, I'm high on this knife. I think it's a really, really good knife. I understand that $200 is a lot of money to a lot of people, considering the action, the materials you're getting on the knife, the fit and finish. I totally think it earns its money. I would pay more for this. Don't tell anybody that. But, if they had this for $300 like the Pleroma, I think it totally justifies that cost. I think it's not as exciting or weird or bizarre or as, like, amazingly crafted as the Pleroma in terms of, like, the innovation. But as far as, like, a better shape for a blade, a little bit more classy of a look instead of confusing, I think this totally does the job. I really think it makes the Hodion and the Neon kind of quake in their boots, because you're getting such a practical blade shape and such a great package of fidgety and the looks and just the fit and finish. I think it's all coming together to be like a special knife. And I think the way they released it, was kind of under the radar. There wasn't a lot of lead time as far as I'm aware. It's just kind of like, here's a knife. It comes in 4 colors. Do you want it? Do you want to buy it? Maybe. So this knife, I think, will kind of pick up steam as time goes on and people get their hands on it. I think it deserves a little bit more attention than it's getting right now. And I think for a lot of people, this can be an excellent EDC to the office knife. I think it's perfect for that. Cutting up apples in your lunchroom, opening up letters and stuff like that. If somebody's mildly interested in the knife hobby and you hand them this, they'll be able to appreciate the aesthetics and the action and the shape of the blade and all that, and not be scared. So I think all those things really speak home to me personally, but I think there's a lot of people that kind of knife would fill their role, in their knife collection somewhere. And so I highly recommend this knife. I think it's an excellent find, and I'm sort of kind of considering getting another one, maybe just to keep safe, and maybe do a champagne one to match my watch. I don't know. I'm crazy. I have a problem, guys. Is there a hotline for this? Is there a hotline you should call? I don't know what that is. But that's it. See you in the next video.